Okay, now, everybody takes glory in the smallest of things, and the smallest of things here you don't even notice, which is that about almost 4 years ago, the little company I helped start a long time ago got bought. It got bought by some name brand big company with a big red logo, and they believe in branding, and they believe in making sure every briefing goes out of the place with just the right colors of the branding, and I snuck this out. I snuck this out with the old logo, so it's just my little bit of pride. I didn't go the whole distance and wear my old company T-shirts with the company logo, but I didn't think about it. Props. Everybody needs props. Okay, so there's a title. There's actually been several titles to this talk. I went through several titles, and finally the organizing committee decided that they didn't like it and that there was a better title. So they got a nice title, and we'll go with that. But I didn't change the talk in any way to change it, so I'll just freely admit that I didn't. This talk, most of us who do technical talks, there's something really juicy and interesting we've done lately technically that we just want to get out and tell everybody about, whether they care or not. Okay, well, they wouldn't let me do one of those. Okay, what they wanted me to do, and it was fine with me, is if I could offer you some perspective about signal processing and that craft we do in history, and just sort of, okay, here's my shot. I haven't shown up in 20 years. What do you have to say? Okay, so that's fair. That's what we're going to do. You know, the usual commentary, which is everything I say is exactly my own opinion. Okay, I will not run out the door after this is over, so if you want to come and argue with me, that's good. I wouldn't tell it to you if I didn't think it were true. Okay, and so there we go. The first thing I want to start off with is this is a good audience. Typically when I go to one of those big signal processing society meetings like ICAST, if you do the demographic, it's overwhelmingly graduate students, okay, and faculty members, and then people like Alex and me running around from meeting to meeting to meeting and never get to go to any technical talks, okay. This group is obviously a little bit different because you got more age perspective, but I thought the first thing I would do, which has nothing to do with view graphs in here, that I've got, is to show you a book. Nowadays it is possible to privately publish this thing. You don't have to read it, okay, but the reason I'm showing it is called The Tube Guys, okay, and you say, well, tubes, what are those things? Yeah, I know they're cylinders. Okay, this is vacuum tubes. Okay, and in particular, it's high-power microwave vacuum tubes, and it's what this guy did back in the old days. And the reason I'm telling you about it is this was the first Silicon Valley boom that was not fruit. Okay, yeah, there's Hewlett-Packard who made little audio amplifiers and stuff like that. But if you want to know what the first real big entrepreneurial, many people out here kind of activity that went on, it was after the Second World War, and the Cold War started to be gearing up, and what the military needed was to do electronic countermeasures. And to do countermeasures, you need high-power microwave tubes, particularly ones that you can control the frequency, coherent signal generation. So this is klystrons and traveling wave tubes and stuff like that. There was a whole industry out here from the late 40s on through the mid-60s. Companies that you've heard of, like Watkins Johnson, well, it started with that. Litton started with that, and so forth. And so one of the fascinating things to trace out historically is what was Silicon Valley really doing before silicon was an important part of it. Okay, this was 15 years of a bunch of people who made a bunch of money entrepreneurially doing something technical. Sure, okay, Lockheed Missiles in Space down the road, Ames, Sylvania, Philco. You don't remember Philco anymore, but it's now called Aeronautic Ford or L'Oreal. Okay, so all these things had an amazing history. You can actually trace out 6 different chunks of technology that rolled in a big wave through the valley. And so, no, I'm not going to show you my book. I'm afraid you'll take it because it's way too interesting if you're really into magnetrons and klystrons and so forth. Oh, what I want to talk about, which is a natural thing for the electrical engineers to talk about, I want to talk about the model. I want to talk about how it all works. I want about predictability And you're saying, there's no predictability in our business. There's no, well, you'll see. So let's see on this. So let's see. Will that work? Sure. So I'm going to prognosticate. Okay. Now, Alex, if your memory isn't that bad, you'll remember that I actually developed a few of these view graphs about 5 years ago when the Signal Processing Society was going through the what is our future, what should the society be? And the society reasonably said, well, heck, it sort of depends on what signal processing is going to be. So maybe we should try to guess about signal processing. So they invited somebody who was me to give a talk about something I knew nothing about, but was prepared to talk about it in public. Okay, so let's start off with an observation. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Anybody know who said that? You got to know that, Joe. Okay. So, how about this one? It's not hard to make predictions, it's just tough to make ones that are right. Okay, that would be me. Okay, so this is the engineering view. Okay, so what we're going to do is try to figure out a basis for predictions. And what I want to do is I want to take a look at a model that seems to me to fit over and over and over again when I look at various technologies. Sure, there's exceptions, but let's look at it and analyze it and see what time scale that puts things on. I think we all have this idea. Let me use a specific example. Gee, I'm going to start a company, and all I need is a year's worth of money, and with that year's worth of money, I'm going to perfect the technology, sell it to somebody, and get large. Okay, and then what you find out is it's longer than that. Okay, at the best, it's longer than that. Okay, so let's figure out what the time scale is. Let's figure out a model for innovation in maybe everything, but for sure the signal processing business. So let's look at a couple steps, about 7 of them in my view. So first of all, I need a working definition, and if y'all will just read that along with me, no, I won't even read it to you. You got to know what signal processing is, and it's making signals better and making them appropriate to what I need. So y'all know that. I don't need to read it to you. This is the official but not complete definition. There's a big paragraph at the beginning of the Signal Processing Society's charter that says, here's what it is. But it's basically making things that aren't good enough and fitting into our needs, which is actually what all engineering is. Okay, so I want to do steps. I'm going to give you an example or two. Okay, but let me tell you what the steps are. Number one is an application. Somebody comes in and tells you, we're not going to give you any money unless, or I'm going to kill you unless, or wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? Something that is an outrageous, completely unreasonable, unattainable thing. Okay? Dr. Nierenberg and I worked on such a thing a long time ago. I can't even tell you what it is to now.
It was unattainable.
And it turned out to be unattainable. Okay, so let's start off with an impossible application requirement. Okay, I want to build a stairway to the stars. You know, I want to be able to live for a day without air. Okay, but let's start off with unattainable. Okay, almost always the step that follows it, if somebody says, yeah, I can't do that, well, let's go over and do a little theory about it to see if it violates Nyquist, does it violate Shannon, you know, does it violate the third law, fourth and second and third and first of thermo, okay, should it even be attainable? And then quite often you find out that, well, yeah, if I only knew how to do it, it's not out of bounds. So there's typical a theoretical phase that happens somewhere by somebody. Oh, what after that? Well, then often somebody else, goes off and shows that it can be done at all, that it can be implemented at all. Way too big, way too heavy, costs too much, needs too many electrical engineers and physicists to touch it all at the same time to make it work. Okay, but they create an existence proof that it is physically implementable. Okay, well, what happens then? Typically over years, there's technology-enabled cost reduction, reliability improvement, making it better.
And cheaper.
And gotta be cheaper. and gotta be cheaper. Okay. So I didn't say better, I actually focused on the cost reduction, but it's really all of the above. So what happens then? It then hits, with it, better, cheaper, smaller, lighter, all those things, it actually hits the original target application and starts to fill that need. Okay? Inevitably, as soon as it does, people start asking, well, can it do this, can it do that? Okay, now that you've done that, you did that for me yesterday, what can you do for me now? Okay? And then next they say, well, okay, you solved that, but there were other limitations to the system, and don't worry, you're getting stretched out here. Pretty soon I'm going to give you a concrete example. It will be radar. Okay? Or somebody says, there's other system problems. Are you smart enough to make your piece of it be so good that it can compensate for other system problems? And you get that going. And typically you find additional applications and additional customers and make a bunch more money at that phase. And then when you're finally feeling a sigh of relief, somebody comes in and poses the next 2 orders of magnitude harder, impossible to implement, can't possibly done problem. And what do you think happens then? You go again. Okay? So you say, okay, that sounds fine. Give me an example. Okay? Let's go deep here. Anybody know what that is? I know, it's a radar antenna. Okay, anybody know specifically what kind? Who's going to show off and tell me that they were in the Navy 40 years ago? And that's an SPS-40, okay, radar reflector. Okay, it was installed on almost all destroyers in the U.S. Navy and other things. Those of you who love this sort of number, okay, the feed is up here, the reflector is here, cosecant squared. Antenna operates at about 400 megahertz.
Whoa.
Yeah, 400 megahertz. Power of about a megawatt, peak power. Okay, so how do these things work? You know, you all did it in college. You know, I'm going to transmit a pulse. Okay, I'm going to collect it, concentrate it with the antenna. It's going to go out. It's going to bounce off of something, and it's going to come back. And hopefully, I'm going to be able to detect it on the noise and the clutter and crap like that. And I'm going to measure the round trip time and call that the distance, and I'm going to know which way the antenna was pointed because I bothered to measure it when it was turning around. Okay, and now I can put a spot on a scope. Okay, that was the Mark 1 Mod 0 basic air search radar. And already you're saying, hallelujah, this is a wondrous thing. You know, I've got, we went to war with it, you know, such a big deal. Okay, but we're not going to stop. Okay, because once we got it, I want to go through that cycle with you and tell you the kind of things that happen. So, the problem I pose for you is, now that I got that basic thing built, and I spent World War II building radars and training people and developing magnetrons and klystrons and all that kind of stuff, okay, what do I want to do next? Somebody comes in and says, you know, I bet you $1 that I am not really extracting all the information from those radar pulses that can be extracted. Well, like what? Well, one thing would be radial velocity. You know, all I'm doing is measuring where it is. Can you tell me how fast it's moving my way? Can you tell me how fast it's moving left and right? Can you tell me this? Can you tell me that? Tell me all this other stuff. You say, well, I don't know. I'd have to probably take the difference between 2 returns and maybe measure the time difference, or maybe do this. And you immediately start off into a set of theory we'll call sample data theory. Okay, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, people start writing books about it and say, I can do like differentiation, I can do like integration, I can filter to get rid of clutter, I could. Well, and so you end up with a rich, by the mid-50s, you end up with a rich theory, at that point completely unimplementable, you know, about what more I might do with radar pulses. Okay, so that would stop right there, except that somebody with a whole bunch of money, in this case the U.S. government, went to a couple places like the Lincoln Labs and a few others and said, is this even feasible? Should I even start a program of implementation, productization, cost reduction, performance improvement, resistance to the bouncing on a ship where guns are going off? Because I haven't even seen one work yet. So they would pay somebody a Bell Labs, a Lincoln Labs, or something like that, to do a zero experiment. And as soon as you see it work, you say, huh. And by the way, if you actually really go read the history of that, the delay lines they used for the processing were typically a tub of mercury, okay, in which you transmitted an acoustical signal, bounced all around, and came out the other end and gave you a couple milliseconds of delay. And if that was too shaky for you, you get a big quartz crystal that's cut very carefully to reflect the signal all around. Okay, so the physical limitations of these things are nothing you would imagine now, because, oh, by the way, hallelujah, in the mid-60s, it started to become possible to do something called digitize the signal. So not only will you sample data, but you're going to quantize it and carry it around digitally. So, proof of concept with unfieldable technology. Think about the big crystals and the micro and the mercury, which, by the way, they did field because it's all they had. And then you go to work for the next 15, 20 years to drive down the cost, to make it more reliable. And pretty soon there's one on every pleasure boat, in America. So far, so good. So, what happens next? Well, that was the operational, then commercial success. Okay, what happens next? Then people come along and say, oh man, I go in among the, I go into the fjord and all I see is the damn mountains. I can't see boats anymore. Well, why don't I subtract one trace from another? Why don't I do this? Why don't I do a moving target? Okay. Well, what else can we do? Let's do anti-jam, let's do static. Okay. And new markets. And then after that, somebody says, well, the real problem is actually the radar is working perfectly, but I just can't make the antenna any bigger without the whole falling over. Okay. Or the airplane, I'm trying to carry this antenna in. The airplane can't take off because of the size of the antenna. Can I do something really snaky by doing a signal processing thing that allows the airplane to act like it's physically longer and building a synthetic aperture antenna? Okay. Well, maybe I can. Okay, so off it goes again. So if you trace back from about 1950, okay, to about, I'll pick a number, 1985, okay, you can in fact trace through each one of these steps, going from where only the military could afford to even think about it, to where the military could only afford to even implement it and field it. Okay, and then step after step after step after step of performance improvement, cost reduction, and so forth, you finally get to where, like I say, pleasure boats have the simple ones, and almost everything can have something more sophisticated. Now, recycle. Okay, where are you going to go now? Let me show you an example of something you might not have thought of. Okay, what if I want to do the same thing underwater? Okay, now I want to do a synthetic aperture sonar. And some of you are going to jump up and say, oh, this is horrible because air is at least approximately isotropic and, homogeneous and all that, and water is disgusting and there's multipath. Yeah, okay, so I've got a few more problems. Okay, so what are we going to do? We go off and do a little math. Should it be doable? Is the problem invertible? Well, actually it is. Oh, but you can never implement it. Okay, you get the drill. Okay, in this particular case, the whole dead gum thing is mounted in what looks like a torpedo, and these are the synthetic aperture antennas. The elements of the synthetic aperture by the currents, in fact, is building the equivalence of an antenna about 25 feet long. And with the antenna 25 feet long, you all know, because Fourier told you so, that you can figure out how far what the beam will look like. And this thing could map half a mile in both directions with the accuracy of about an inch squared. Okay, just unattainable. Okay, but let's just go back to 1950 and take step. It's all true. Okay, by the way, since I'm a DSP weenie, let me point out that everything else in here is DSP also. The sensors, the navigation, the control, the communications. I mean, this is a DSP delight or nightmare if you're trying to make it work. Okay, so that's the cycle I claim we should be looking at. Okay, and I want to draw back and ask you to think about it from this perspective. Each one of these cycles in the radar case took 20 years. And when I laugh, because it might be me, about the entrepreneur who wants to get something going in no time and with not enough money, okay, then you really need to know that there is a time scale. There is a maturation and gestation associated with these things. It's measured in a long time if I really want to have a really significant market effect. Okay, what else? A whole bunch of skills required, and the thing that fascinates me is a large number of the people had no idea what the big picture was or what they were helping. Okay, you go to, now I'm not going to pick on materials guys here. You go to a materials person and say, I need something that stands up to this temperature range and this, and has to be about that elastic, and they go and find something for you, having no idea what the big picture was, but they were not just helpful, they were crucial. Graduate students will often work on something, and that, again, don't have the systems, what we would consider to be the systems view, the systems picture. Okay, but doesn't matter, it's still helpful. As a practical matter to people like me, what you find out is there was no single source of government funding. And a matter of fact, it was often competing organizations. Okay, and it was often some third party, somebody late to the game, or somebody else independent who was able to come in and look at all this going on and figure out how to make a coherent whole of the technology and pick the best of it, because each one of the development groups had their favorites. And they sometimes would not get unstuck from their favorite in order to look at the bigger picture and see if there's a better way to do it overall. When I talked about things like the bowls full of mercury and the crystals, okay, some of these things were things that you should have moved on from, but they were familiar with them. Even better, they have the patents for them, and they just didn't want to shake loose from that which was the sure thing. So this idea of being stuck into your view often makes you vulnerable to the person who isn't so stuck. Many derivative products have resulted. We always talk about the space program and the Velcro. Okay, but if you go look at radar, the guys who are doing radar never expected you're going to have one in your kitchen. Okay, I mean, Raytheon at least named it the radar range to give you an idea of what it was, but later on people forgot that. By the way, I heard a little story from my son-in-law's father, who actually worked at Raytheon making magnetrons, and he said they just could not effectively compete with a particular Japanese company who was making the magnetrons, and so it was the equivalent of shipping a $10 bill with every magnetron they shipped. Okay, because it's not good enough to invent the technology. You also need to be able to make it manufacturable and cheap enough to where you actually have marketplaces with having. Okay, I've had the privilege over my career of doing a lot of stuff associated with government needs, government applications. It's my experience also that the commercial use of these things lagged the military use of it or the government use of it by only 20 years. Now, why is that? Well, the government had, if you will, often a bigger problem, was prepared to spend more money per unit, was willing to help finance the hero experiment. And cost. Okay, and it often takes the 20 years in order to have enough steps of cost reduction, much less system robustness, to get you where you need to go. Okay, so you got my story? Okay, you believe it? Yeah, why not? Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. I'm going to give you a long list of them, and I'm going to give you a homework assignment, which you'll blow off because there's no grade on this course. Okay. But I'm going to give you a long list of them that if you sit down and piece those things out, you'll find that every one of them goes through this cycle. In some cases, the homework problem is to figure out how many cycles it's gone through. 0.7, 1.3, we're in the third pass already. And it's an interesting puzzle. But let me show you one more that this is sort of one you take and show your freshman engineering class about things take a while to happen. This is a drawing. You see the sophisticated graphics here? This is what PhD theses looked like in the 1970s. Okay. So much for everybody having a workstation at their desk and wonderful graphic software and being able to do their own thesis. Okay, you actually paid somebody to do it, and this was the quality of the drawings you got. Okay, but enough of that. This was a thesis at Stanford, a guy named John Connors. And the problem was a customer came in and said, I've got airplanes, and the truth, it was really something called F-15 was being designed. And F-15 has engines and they're loud. Okay, and the pilot not only could not hear, as soon as he flipped off the microphone, all you heard out the radio was the engines. And so the government said, is there anything you can do about this? And they had in mind like some sort of analog tunable filter that you played around with that was somehow. And the dutiful folks at Stanford said, of course, don't take this wrong. They said, of course, we'll take your money. Okay, okay, but let me explain ahead of time that this is a hard problem. Okay, the way a filter works, whether it's digital or analog, and the way a filter works best is if the good stuff is in this part of the spectrum, and the bad stuff is in this part of the spectrum. And I figured that out, and then I designed a filter, deterministic, adaptive, analog, digital, don't care, okay, and it's going to get rid of the bad stuff and keep the good stuff. Well, the trouble is this engine noise went from here to creation, okay, and it was loud. So, unknown broadband interference, total spectral overlap, and oh, by the way, there's nothing I know about the voice signal because that's actually supposed to be high entropy, good information that I'm actually sending over the radio, otherwise I transmitted. Okay, so here was Connis's idea, usually attributed to Bernard Woodrow. Okay, but the idea was this: I still want to have the microphone, I still want to have the engine, I guess, if I want to fly. Okay, but why don't I also try to get a copy of the engine noise and then do something clever up here in a device we'll call an adaptive noise canceller. Okay, that will in fact be able to very cleverly figure out what the engine noise is at a given epoch and subtract it broadband out from underneath the voice, improving the signal interference ratio considerably. That was the idea. Now, I want to point out again, they didn't know how to implement this. Okay, adaptive filters at the time were either something made out of, looked like a chemistry set. Okay, it was something called mendisters, and it was chemicals in little test tube things. It adapted glacially slowly. Or it was, I could go write programs on something new and fancy called an IBM 1620. And it would do a couple of iterations a second, which put it at about 10,000 times slower than real time. Okay, so let's not worry about implementation. Okay, let's think grand principles. What would I do if I had the technology? Where would we go? What would we do? And so John wrote this thesis that said we could do this. We went and did a bunch of nice theory about it, because it wouldn't be a technical talk unless I showed you at least one block diagram with arrows and boxes and stuff. I will draw it for you. But the basic idea was that I'm going to have the pilot's voice plus the interference that made it through the transfer function of the airplane, the cockpit, and into the microphone along with the speaker. And then I was going to capture a nice clean reference of it, say with a microphone or an accelerometer that's attached right to the engine. And I'm going to run it in here to some filter, and this filter is going to be smart enough using an error signal produced between the two to somehow manipulate the three variables, the coefficients, the taps, whatever you want to call them, in order to bend the noise acquired at the accelerometer and have it exactly match the noise that's showing up at the microphone along with the pilot. And if you can do that, you subtract it out. The airplane changes attitude, it changes altitude, they turn up the engines, the noise changes. Well, it obviously needs to be adaptive in order to track all those changes. So could you do all that? The answer was, in theory, yes. And they went and used, has anybody in here ever used an HP 2116 mini computer? Yeah, I know you have. Yeah, I know you have. Okay, ringers. Okay, but in fact, it turns out you can go program this all up on HP 2116 and run it at 100,000th of real time, if you will. Good at it. Okay, so, but the important thing is you got your thesis side, right? Who cares if anyone's going to use it? Who cares if it's 1,000 or 10,000 times real time? I got my thesis signed, I'm so out of here. So the optimization function for a PhD is achieved. Okay, and we have yet to see whether or not it is actually going to be useful. So what was it actually used in? Was it in fact used in airplanes to take pilot noise out? No, it turns out that there was another practical problem that the military had, who, when this idea was presented to them, they said, oh man, this is worth billions of dollars. This idea is worth billions of dollars. And even better, the sampling rates at which we need to operate are low enough that we can actually suck it up and build something that does it. Okay, I'm going to explain the problem to you. I'm going to explain why it was so worthwhile. No, let me explain why it was so worthwhile for you, to you. Back in the day, back when $1 billion was really $1 billion, the Navy was paying on average $1 billion per dB, okay, to reduce the noise floor of sonar systems. Now, okay, that's sort of a grandiose number because it really meant getting the implementation to all of the fleet and training people and all that. But very generally speaking, if I wanted to increase the sensitivity of a sonar, active or passive, and the way you did that is by pulling down the noise floor, okay, and that meant putting rubber on submarines. It meant all sorts of physical and electrical things. It was $1 billion a dB. Okay, so there's money. Okay, there's tangible money. Well, what was the idea and what was the problem? The problem was that most surface ships and a lot of submarines had a sonar mounted out on the chin. Okay, and the whole idea of putting it out there was it could hear either echoes from your own transmitter, or it could hear passive signals coming in from all directions into this sonar transducer. The signals would go in and be signal processed to detect the signal at all, determine the direction. Oh, while we're at it, let's get range rate and other stuff, because from radar we know how to do that now. Okay, well, what was the problem? The problem was that there was a noise floor on this sonar induced by the fact that all through this ship were motors, spinning electrical motors, pumps, just all manner of motors. Okay, and when they spun, they made the whole rattle at multiples of 60 hertz. Okay, that was transmitted, we call this a propagation. It was propagated through the hull to the sonar dome, made noise around the sonar dome, okay, and that generated, it wasn't flat noise, it was lots of spiky noise, okay, but nonetheless it screwed up the ability to actually detect the submarines you wanted to detect, which were of the Russian persuasion. Okay, so do you see a potential opportunity here? Potential opportunity was to go and put accelerometers on each one of those motors, okay, run those signals up, and then provide each one of those accelerometers into an adaptive filter. Bring the sonar signal in here, and look at that signal and see if I can reduce the interference, okay, by going around and twiddling with the filter coefficients. Okay, and it turns out that by doing that, you can reduce the noise floor on the order of 10 to 15 dB. I know you can do the calculation, 10 or 15 times 1 billion. Okay, you've got it. That this was actually a totally excellent investment on the part of the Navy. Let's talk signal processing for a minute. Okay, the sample rates I need to achieve here are like a kilohertz. Okay, and if I'm going to sample at a kilohertz, I can actually build a multi-tap, multi-hundred tap filter out of things called SSI, okay, and then MSI. I mean, fairly simple. They used to get 4-bit by 4-bit multiplier chips. Well, you actually build a multiplier like that out of those chips, and then you put a few cards. So you could actually build a half-rack implementation of a multi-channel, multi-tap adaptive filter that would operate at the galactic sampling rate of a kilohertz in order to reduce the noise floor by 10 or 15 dB, making submarines detectable at substantially larger ranges. Worth doing, right? Okay, so, and if you want to go implement it, well, the implementation is pretty much as I've shown you. I have the accelerometers here. I adaptively filter it here. This is the transfer function through the hull, and so forth. From the standpoint of the sonar processor, it looks like somebody built little notch filters for me that are almost perfectly narrow and track the speed of the motors virtually perfectly, even as they change speed under load and that kind of thing. It was a galactically wonderful solution. Okay, so can you go use this anywhere? This is 1975-ish, up through 1980-ish. Okay, are you going to use this for any commercial application? Probably not, because it still costs a fortune. Could you use it for any commercial application now? Well, you might be able to. As we say in our business, SOS. This is the same old stuff. Okay. Actually, the second S usually means something else, but it's the same old stuff. And as a matter of fact, it's now possible to move this to commercial applications exactly because with the theory established, the hero experiments done, the practical implementations, okay, done, and then improved, and then catching the wave of semiconductors. Okay, you're able to, through that 20 years of going from here to here, you have an opportunity to apply quite broadly. So my thesis, which of course I'm not done with because you're not going to give it for me on stage yet, okay, is the application seems to always drive the novel and outrageous idea. Okay, but the person you're going to ultimately sell it to in volume is not the first person you're going to sell it to, or maybe even the second. Okay, and don't count on doing it quick. Okay? Good enough? So now we're going to go back and say, well, that's pretty good. Let me go back and see if I'm going to be very audacious here and call it Treichler's rule. Okay, but don't anybody else call it that. But this is, I'm saying, let's go look at other applications. When I was in graduate school, a bunch of very smart people were working on something called computerized axial tomography. It was the new thing. Okay, so instead of taking flat X-rays and trying to guess what was inside you, you took a bunch of them. Okay, and through the miracle of signal processing. Okay, in those days, often special purpose implementations of signal processors in order to do just exactly the algorithm needed. Okay, but look at it. CAT goes to better CAT, goes to faster CAT, goes to 3D CAT, goes to MRI, goes to blah, 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 blah. Okay, is it because the algorithm guys are so wonderful? Absolutely. Okay, is it because better and better devices were developed to simply do it better? Yes. Was it because signal processing in general was so much easier to implement with just general purpose computing? Absolutely. So you can do the pie chart any way you want. All three contribute. Okay, but now we have this, it's amazing compared to, but let's go look at everything else. Seismic exploration, I can repeat exactly the same thing. Let's go macro to micro and just look into the design of an ADD converter. How are ADD converters done? And how do you do them now? And why did you make the design trades you could? Well, because this is a lot cheaper than it used to be, and I can do that. And on and on. I'm not going to read them all to you. But your homework problem, if this were a real class as opposed to pizza and sitting around talking to friends, okay, colleagues would be look at each one of those and actually map out the steps and tell me how many cycles and fractional cycles it's gone. Now, what you should do when you do that, of course, is say, man, there's opportunity in there. This thing has only gone 1 1/4. If I could do this step or this step or this step, there's glory, there's money. Okay, maybe not love. Okay, but one of those in there. So that is my claim is that's all true, which of course leads to the following claim that there's more out. Did I break something? Ah, there we go. Okay, so it finally commenced it to go. I slipped in a point a minute ago. Okay, and actually I'm going to flip and do another chart and come back. Don't sue me if I go back a chart. You're sitting here saying, fine, I buy this. It's an interesting idea. It's a model. Let's look at it. Let's see if it suggests anything. Great, that's a good thing. The other thing I need you to know, both because it's practically important and there's a psychological problem induced by it, is, are you ready for this? We're all special. Okay, and I knew you knew we were all special. Okay, no, it's just not the evening where we are and the ambiance. You are special because you live in the world of digital signal processing, and you have something going for you that most of you had nothing to do with. Okay, So let me tell you what it is and make a comparison for you. The answer is semiconductors, by the way. Okay? So let me show you something. And I want you to think about it because this is really important. What's that? It's a Boeing 707. You know when it was introduced into the fleet? Late 50s. Has engines, has wings, fuselage, you know, about that big, carries a bunch of people. Okay? So, late 50s. Okay, let's go 50 years later, and what do you get? A 787. Way cool. Okay, maybe it burns 30% less fuel. But otherwise, carries about the same number of people. Otherwise, flies about as fast. All in all, you know, 50 years gets you 40%. That's not much of a CAGR in our financial world. Okay? So, let's go the other way. No, that's not the way I want to go. I actually want to pass this around in case you've ever seen one. This is what, in my view, and in John Treichler's narrow view, this is what kicked open the door on digital signal processing. Okay, this isn't one of TRW's, but this is a knockoff of the TRW 1010J. 64 pins, you can count them. Okay, burn 3.5 watts, which is considered outrageous. You know, and now you see these chips with fans and chimneys and stuff. 3.5 watts. It could execute 6 million multiply ads a second. Okay, and you've probably seen them. Some of you have worked with them. Okay, but let's look at that device. Okay, that's what it looked like, and what I want to show you next to it is, not that I'm picking on Xilinx, because they happen to be a Bay Area company. That Xilinx chip, does anybody know the ratio of clock speeds? Okay, more than 100 times faster. Does anybody know the number of Macs it can implement? Thousands. Okay, so it doesn't take 100, 1,000. Gee, is that sounding like 5 orders of magnitude? Okay, that the silicon guys have done for us in the last 40 years. Okay, there is no business in the universe that can stand up to or remain unchanged by the fundamental costs of the business going down by a factor of 10 to the 5. Okay, so if we haven't done something useful with that, you know, shame the heck on us. Okay, an example I like because it's personal. Okay, we always like the personal stuff. Okay, I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. In 1980, when a customer came in, yeah, it was sort of a special customer, came in and said, I've digitized some radio signals far, far away. Okay, and I've brought them at a distance to here, and my plan is to make them analog again, and then proceed with analog signal processing. I have a hunch that's a bad idea. Okay, have you thought at all about taking these digits as presented to you and doing radio things, tuning, filtering, demodulation with digits? And you say, well, I thought about it on paper, and I thought about this, and I can do it on my computer at 1,000th real time. And they said, no, I mean fast. And oh, by the way, I mean perfectly. I mean linear phase filters. I mean perfectly excellent differentiators in the FM demodulators. I mean, I want this to be, obviously, of technical quality. Okay? And we said, well, no, we hadn't thought about it, but give us a little bit of money and we'll think about it for you. Okay, you got to live. You got to eat. Had 3 little kids, you know, you got to do something. Okay, so we went off and did the theory for it. Sure enough, anything you can do with analog filters and stuff like that, we can do here, and probably better, if you don't mind the fact that it's enormously bigger, heavier, and costs a whole lot more. This particular customer said, I'm willing to do the hero experiment. Okay, and I was lucky enough to be there when he said that and gave us the money. This thing is 15 3/4 inches tall times 2, weighed 2,000. It weighed 100 plus pounds. Had so many fans in it, we feared it would levitate. Okay, those little multiplier accumulators I showed you, little, 143 of them. Okay, it took in a signal 5 megahertz wide and would digitally tune, filter, demodulate, and do some other stuff. But it was radio. As a matter of fact, when we demonstrated it to the customer, we actually brought a signal off the roof, RF down converted it into an acceptable band, digitized it, and tuned out car radio signals. Okay, FM signals like a car radio would, because that was the test. We would do that. Okay, the reason I'm showing you that and telling you about it is, okay, here's mine. I usually bring up my iPhone 2 because that's my real phone. Okay, 5 megahertz bandwidth. It actually tunes out a wider signal. Heck, it transmits to, does forward error correction coding, and on and on and on and on. So what I'm trying to make real to you is that not only is this cycle going on, but part of what enables that cycle is the fact that we have been on the very positive side of the technology improvement on semiconductors to take something that was impossible, unreasonable a few years ago, and if you hold your breath and pick the right time, okay, it'll be there. It's really hard to believe that progressive improvement's going to happen. And part of my speech later on is we get locked into this what's now, okay, and the ability to have faith in what's next and project that and project it entrepreneurially is a real interesting test for us engineers who love to have everything nailed down and very clear and assured going before us. Okay, chips and chips. Okay, so now a bunch of observations. The good news is you're not stuck here forever, but you're not done yet either. Okay, so where does that take us? Okay. First of all, the realization, does this sound familiar, Alex? Okay, signal processing will be everywhere. It's just going to be flat in everything. Okay, get over it. Okay, that's fine for us because we want to put it there. Okay, the second thing is, and this is a little bit harder, is that other fields need it too, even if they don't call it DSP. And other fields are actually going off, re-implementing it because, you're going to hate me for this, it's really only math. Okay. Okay, and they can perfectly well recreate it in their own world because their own needs, their own technologies, all those other things are turning around to the point that semiconductors can help them too. DSP is the thing you would do in semiconductors if you could, and you would. Okay? And so from my colleagues who are educators, you really need to look at the fact that DSP, which, let's see, when I took it in 1969, was a first ever experimental class at Rice University in DSP. And there were just a couple of professors trying it so they could try to get tenure. True story. I'll name names if you want to know. They turned out to be famous. Anyway, so it was very engineering. It was graduate engineering. And what you see now is that, in fact, an incredible number of people need it, and not just engineers. Virtually every technical person uses it in some form or the other. And even in the arts, some of you know a colleague of mine, a guy named Rick Johnson. Have you ever run across Rick Johnson? Okay, he's been getting a lot of press the last half decade for helping art historians, okay, basically look at X-rays of canvas and look at the periodicities of the canvas in order to determine whether that canvas really came from the place they thought it did. Is it really a Renoir? Is it really a Van Gogh? Was it a 7th picture? Was it a 15th? Okay, it turns out to have amazing diagnostic ability. And you would look at it and say, pardon the expression, shit, that's just FFTs. Okay, so we've got something that the whole world needs, and most of us are still stuck in our upbringing where it was a graduate course that you might use very selectively, maybe only on a military thing. Okay, and in fact, wrong, 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 and wrong. Okay, so, sorry if I sound preachy, but you were foolish enough to let me talk, and so I'm going to do that. So, I showed you a bunch of applications before that I claimed were already in the cycles. Okay, I just want to list for discussion purposes 2 pages, which I'm not going to read to you because you'll get the notes off the web page as soon as I give them to the web page. I mean, this was just my list of things that if I, say that you got a MacArthur grant and you were covered for a couple of years, how long does it take you to spend $500,000? 3 weeks. Okay. 2 Teslas and yes, okay, got it. Okay, but let's look at it. Entertainment. People are not going to be happy until they have the holodeck. I want to be able to fully immersively do Well, how far are we there from that? A ways. Okay, can I even break down the steps for you to get there? No. But what I can tell you is that signal processing in manifestly many forms, okay, presentation, imagery, communication, all that sort of stuff, will be totally in the middle of it. And I will go down, not, through every one of these. I'm going to do one of Alex's favorite, universal language translation. You know, I want a gizmo to make the world go better, where, okay, it's like in Star Trek, okay? But think about what it would do for you. My wife's favorite, whatever she is the tricorder. Okay, I want to be able to go up and without physical contact, completely assess the body and say, Jim, he's dead. Okay, that's what tricorders are for. That's what you tell. Okay, and on and on and on. I want sensors. I want public health and spreading diseases. That's somehow now topical. Okay, let's go and do some more. Personal transport. I want secure, inexpensive, transparent communications. I want environmental protection. I want robotic systems to go do stuff that I don't want to do. I don't want just to park my car for me. You know, if we're going to dig coal, I'd like to have it dig coal for me. I'd like to do things. And when you make the list of DSP things that requires in terms of, by the way, I consider automatic control, which the IEEE thinks is a separate society, signal processing. Information theory, signal processing. Okay, but communications, signal processing. Okay, so let's get large here. You know, this is all hours. It's hours to do. Okay. Okay. And of course, the things we can't even imagine, which for me is easy because I can't imagine much, but all those things. And yes, there are still, because I live mostly in I won't say the military, I'll say the government, national interest side of things. There's things I'd like to do. I'd like to make the oceans transparent so I can find bad guys. Or if I'm the good guy, I'd like to make the oceans opaque. It's all a matter of which side you're on. Okay, I'd like to find terrorists who are using 4th generation and now 5G phones. Turns out that's really hard. Okay, the very fancy things we do with MIMO and large bandwidth and all sorts of fancy signal processing we do, as you might guess, it makes it really hard to go find somebody who is, now you might find that very reassuring, but it's very hard. Okay, finding nuclear proliferators, eco theories, more and more and more. Okay, so what do we need to do to solve all these problems? Okay, I'm going to be whiny for a minute or so, and then, of course, in our uplifting note. Okay, I think that, and as I say, some 5 years ago, I told Alex and the crew at the long-range planning meeting for the Signal Processing Society, you know the old thing about we have met the enemy and it is us. Okay, there's some truth to that. Okay, part of it is just by nature we are electrical engineers, and engineers tend to try to build on solid truths to build the next truth, and some of this, I bet I can get there if I only believe hard enough, is hard for us. But let me go through it. First of all is, if I've heard one person, I've heard 1,000 people tell me the signal process is mature, I should go find a new field. Okay, well, let me be negative here. If I'm an academic in a department where the department chair tells me he's not going to put me up for tenure because he or she believes the signal process is going to mature and they're not going to put me up for tenure until I change fields, okay, I've got it, I can take an order. Okay, but if you have the opportunity to look at this on any sort of neutral or level basis, my whole pitch to you is far from mature. We haven't even begun to fight. There are just so many opportunities to apply this. Okay, I'm going to talk about psychological issues. I'm going to talk about the people in our own society and, of course, the IEEE, who somehow think that DSP is really just computer science, so what's the damn difference and who cares? Now, again, I'm sounding slightly unconstructive here, but I'll tell you that if you go look at his computer science curriculum and see how much math is in it, okay, you're going to find not as much as you would have wished. That's an understatement. Okay, whereas we who do signal processing for a living typically came up from a very strong mathematical basis that allowed us to organize our thinking and also actually do the math to come up with algorithms and designs and stuff like that. It's a very different way of thinking, and the idea is that, well, heck, I do both of them on a computer. okay, is really a fallacy that needs to be engaged with or engaged against. Okay, I'm married to an academic, so I have to be careful when I say all these things, but it makes me nuts when people believe that simply teaching somebody how to use a design tool is teaching them the concept. Okay, bad idea. Okay, that one person should go off by themselves and do the report all by themselves. In real companies, teams do stuff. Okay, and if people haven't learned how to work together in teams to produce something that's bigger than the individual capabilities of the people, you're not going to get anywhere. Okay, designing something isn't the whole story. You actually have to build it. It has to work. You have to produce it. You have to test it. Okay, you have to support it. Okay, and we make a lot of attention to people who, oh, you won a design contest. Okay, and let's exalt design contest. So how about the O&M contest? You know, how about the testing contest? You will never see me do those. Communication and leadership. Like most of you, I spend probably 99% of my day communicating. It can be written, it can be talking to people, it can be lecturing, it can be whatever. So the idea that we are raising great engineers who work by themselves, who know all the great design tools, okay, and can't talk to anybody, okay, that's a sure prescription for going nowhere. And unless we as leaders know that, okay, and are working against it, or working in the right direction, that's a more positive thing to say. Okay, an observation that I've made a couple times before. We are in one of the businesses where future shock is a real issue. Okay, when somebody asks me, can something be built? Okay, I'll pull out the iPhone again. I honestly can't understand how this can be done. You know, I built radios. I built digital radios. I know the algorithms, but I just have a hard time getting my head around the fact that this is physically implementable. And if I work hard at it, we can make it another factor of 10 better in about 5 years. Do I believe that? More importantly, am I going to put money on it? Okay, real question. Okay. I work with some people in the government, I won't name who they are, and I finally figured them out. Okay, they're all just in the terms for this room, I call them risk takers. Okay, and I finally figured it out, and I explained to one of them, said, okay, I'm an engineer, there's always risk and there's always uncertainties, and so I'm going to work, and get it up to the 98% point where I'm on solid ground, and then I'll take that risk for the last 2%. You, however, I've noticed, start off and maybe get about to the 10% point, you get bored, and then just take a giant leap to the end. And he smiled and said, yeah, that would be me. Okay? And I get rewarded for taking those risks. Sometimes I land in a mud puddle. Okay? Sometimes I land right where I want. Okay, so this is this business of being willing to accept risk, being willing to believe that these technologies are not perfectly predictable. Moore's law was never a law. Okay, a whole bunch of people worked really hard to keep banging on it to get it there. And even now it's sort of flaking a bit, so we go multi-core and things like that. But there's a whole lot of people who have built their lives and their energy about making that better, and they're going to make it better. How much we don't quite know, but they're going to make it better. Why don't I believe that? Why don't I plan my product design about them getting there when I get there with my part? Okay? Do we think too narrow? And we are so close to done. Okay, I claim that applications drive technology. People don't just sit down and say, I'm going to develop a technology. They don't just sit down and say, I'm going to write a PhD thesis, and it's going to be great, and, you know, they don't. Okay? In every case that I know of, bar none, somebody, somewhere, posed an outrageously difficult problem, and everybody said, and one person was dumb enough to say, huh, interesting, let me think about that. Okay, and they inevitably went through well, let me prove that this can't be done, and then they find out it can be, at least theoretically. And then they say, I bet nobody would pay for this. And if they sniff around, they'll find somebody it's in their interest to do it. And notice I'm 3 of my 7 steps. Okay, the person who had the idea may not hang around to get it done, and so forth and so on. So, applications drive it. And so if you really want to make a name for yourself, do a PhD thesis, blah, 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 listen for crap that can't be done. Okay, I'll also point out, and this is a little problem, I have a whole other talk about the adaptive noise canceller and some other stuff. It turns out those things didn't meet the theory. There was a set of dogma in academia at the time about what was good and what was bad, and those things had a terribly hard time getting sold in the academic community because they didn't match the currently in vogue model. So what's my advice on that? To heck with them. Okay, if you got something that works, okay, don't worry about impressing your techno academic critics. Okay, the ones that succeeded met the need. Okay, and my claim is you can absolutely expect this pattern to continue, and there's all these applications that are far from fulfilled. Okay, now I haven't done the important parts. I tell you where to get money, you know, and how to find the rest of your teammates, and how to communicate well, and how to sell your story. But the whole point of this, the bottom line from my perspective, is that far from signal processing being something that, wow, it was the brand new thing in the 60s and the 70s, we fleshed it out, in the 80s we executed everything that could be done with it. Way not true. Far from being exhausted, we've just begun. Bottom line is, we've got to gain, I'm sounding like some motivational speaker. Okay, I don't apologize. The thing is to gain trust in ourselves to do it. If you understand this is the model, you understand the model, it can be executed. Okay, and one of these applications will pique your interest. Okay, you may be able to make some significant contributions to it, but get involved with it with the understanding of what the cycle is it takes, how long the cycle takes, the kind of help you're going to need to do it, and then it will come true. That'd be it. Yes, sir.
Your seven-step cycle.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on? You talked about the 20-year time frame. Do you think that stays at 20 years? Do you see
that's obviously variable depending on the technology involved. In the particular case, okay, in the particular case that of the ones I looked at, where there was a military part of the cycle, and then at least 2 orders of magnitude of seismic power reduction. Okay, that's what it took. There may be other situations where it doesn't take that long. Or in the case of airplanes, it could take much longer. I mean, that's not 20 years is the historical over the last 50.
Before going further questions, I just have to give something to Dr. It's just a small conversation for you.
Well, thank you. Coming all the way here. It's 2 miles, okay. Let's not get carried away. Do we have time for 1 or 2 questions if they want to ask them?
Yes, please.
Yeah, one problem was like most of those fields are continuously become more dominated by academicians. For example, control theory, information theory. Now signal processing, in many cases, is very hard to read papers and understand the basic concepts in it because it's filled with mathematical jargon, if I want to use that term, and you can't see the ideas, and that's probably in many cases kind of is a roadblock to people who try to get into this field.
Okay, I think that's a very good observation. It brings to mind a response, not a great one, okay, but it's actually, all this is about, this is all real, y'all can make a difference, and so here's the difference you can make. There was a professor at Stanford years ago, okay, in the 70s, and he was one of the smartest people I ever met in the universe. But it was impossible for him to talk to others. Okay, and a fellow that some of you guys know, a fellow named Larry Marple, actually sat down and wrote a book, which is arguably all of this other guy's work. okay, clearly accredited, there's no theft, okay, but it was something that people could understand. And so what book did people go to? Well, they went to Marple's book, okay, and who did this highly annoy? Okay, the guy whose ideas, okay, but the ideas by themselves, unless explained in a way that other humans can understand them, take advantage of them, really aren't that good as ideas. Okay, so a way that's really helpful, something that is really helpful, is when you actually think you've got the big picture on a field, because you've actually done all the shoveling to figure out what all the papers are, and turn it into something. I would highly encourage you to do that. There's something called the Signal Processing Magazine that just loves things like that. The Signal Processing Magazine, I don't think this year, but last year had the highest marks of all IEEE publications in terms of people who read it, found it useful, and did things with it. Okay, and that is an avenue, okay, for getting the synthesis of useful ideas out into the public. And there's actually, going one step further, the IEEE, the Signal Processing Society, actually gives awards to people who write articles for the magazine because they understand how useful that is. Okay, and tutorials and I'll call them syntheses, okay, are highly encouraged. But I didn't solve a real problem with just lots of people writing papers that are inscrutable and are just micro extensions of previous work. That's an academic thing. I'm not going to solve that. Yes?
Well, your mentioned Signal Processing Magazine, I was mulling over the fact that this great presentation took a history of electronic systems, showed how signal processing enabled it. But looking at that magazine now, I don't even see engineering in there anymore. I see tremendously powerful applications based on signal processing, and not even with Fourier theory. For example, and this is a whole new way of thinking of it to me today. They talk about big data, this new buzzword, these giant databases and trying to extract information. Guess what they do? Bayes' theorem, sequential Bayes updating. That's fundamentally what this machine learning is about. Well, the new thing in that game is not the necessity for speed of processing, which is there. It's not semiconductors. It's gigantic, unimaginable data sets. How do you process so much data you have no idea really what's in it? You know, I met a guy once who was ecstatic because he was dealing with his first trillion-row spreadsheet.
A trillion-row spreadsheet. There's a day for you.
These advertising companies out there who just scarf up all your data.
You have no secrets, Lloyd.
No secrets. There's 100 million records with 50 parameters each.
Yeah.
In one little company. Probably it's some gigantic database. They're trying to figure out what's in there.
Okay.
So here you've got an inversion of the usual problem. You want more, faster, better. Now it's bigger.
Yeah.
It's a giant amount of data.
Well, as usual, I'm going to take your question and permute it into something that I can't answer either. Okay, but is it still signal processing?
Well,
Now, my answer is we better define it to be signal processing because machines have more memory, machines have higher speeds. This can be done. Somebody's going to do it. In fact, there is a Bayes theorem behind it. There's issues in how to implement it, how to implement it fast, how to efficiently do storage and stuff like that. So I'm prepared to go, just as I was willing to claim, automatic control and information theory of communications. I think we're crazy if we don't explore that is about manipulating data and gaining information from it. So.
Look, this magazine itself does that.
I saw it. Amazing. Yes, sir.
It does seem like the LTI, the linear time invariant way of thinking, is hindering a lot of the cross
You saw, I didn't even read that book.
Exactly, which is why I wanted you to bring it up, but if you can.
Okay, so thank you. I was concerned I was taking too much time, and I will stop soon. Okay, but I grew up in LTI land. Okay, and I'm comfortable there, and I love transforms, and it's cool, and yeah, but we already know, we've known for decades that we need to develop a facility with nonlinear stuff, okay, with at least highly multidimensional stuff, with mixed, quantized, continuous stuff, which is realms we are not comfortable working in. And instead of trying to figure that out, we seem to be, sounds like a whine, okay, we seem to be reducing the amount of mathematics we do in our curriculum because there's other things we think we need to go touch. This is something that we as a community need to address, because I'm not saying that LTI is tapped out, okay, but I am positive that we're not getting everything out of, okay, negative to me. Another signal processing society magazine a couple of months ago, I saw an article about something I wanted to know about since I was 19. Somebody told me about tensors. And I thought I really need to learn about tensors. I mean, I knew I needed, and I was 2 pages in the article, I was so totally confused, and I couldn't figure out crap. And I said, wow, I must be really stupid. Okay, now, am I stupid? Chances are. Okay, was it badly written? Probably not. But there's something missing in there. Okay, and I think we need to all go learn this other stuff, because apparently if you want to do signal separation in any elegant way, these other mathematical tools are the way to do it. Okay, and we need to make sure people have the opportunity to learn and are taught them well. So, thanks for the softball parts to play. Well, one more.
Yeah, on that F-18 example that you mentioned, the noise in the cockpit is lower than the, also it has vibration, that's the window and all that stuff that goes in there. And you're picking up the noise from the engine with the microphone next to the engine, which is tremendously high. So somewhere probably gets clipped. So you have to do some kind of a...
Well, the art form is you have to go get the signal and condition it. And it turns out, okay, this is signal processing lower, I apologize. You draw the picture, you do the theory, you're done, because your theory has infinite dynamic range.
Right.
Okay. Every real implementation, what you're really fighting is the signal conditioning and the dynamic range issues and those things. Absolutely, that's where the engineering goes. Totally right. So no, it wouldn't work just by sticking a microphone with gum on the engine and running the signal up. Okay, I think with that, I promise.
One last question.
Okay, you're the boss.
I think there's one question.
Was there?
Oh, yeah. You were talking about the noise cancellation issue, and that there were people in academia who were sort of pushing against the new theory. Can you elaborate on that? It takes too long, don't.
Oh,
I just wonder where the disagreement is.
Okay. I'm going to make this a freckle personal. And then give you another example. And it won't take long. I went to graduate school at Stanford. Okay, in a building called Durand. Okay, and right down the hallway, I envisioned a green line just like in Beirut, where on one side you were allowed to think one thing, and on the other side you were allowed to think another. On this side was the Tom Padless side, who did everything with perfectly squares. You collected the data, you computed an R matrix, you inverted an R matrix through any number of elegant mathematical ways. And even though you couldn't do it in real time, don't worry, semiconductors are coming and they will make it better. On this side was a set of folks, principally led by a guy named Bernie Woodrow, okay, who wanted to do it adaptively and imprecisely, but at least keep up with real time. And it turns out you'd have thought it was Sunni and Shia. I mean, seriously, it was to go to war over. Okay, and if those guys control the editorial roles, the boards, then these guys don't get their papers done. That's what I'm talking about. And sometimes you need to say, sorry, I'm going to go implement this. I'm going to go to industry, I'm going to implement it, and we're going to make some money. Sometimes you just got to go do that.
I want to thank Dr. Noah.
Happy to be here and come next time.